Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, the Human Element Series. This is episode 182. I'm Chris Hadnaghi, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, as well as social-engineer.org, and the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since way back in 2009. So if you're looking for any kind of social engineering services, such as adversarial simulations, risk assessments, phishing, or anything else, check out social-engineer.com. Our brand new website will give you an easy rundown of all the things that we do and how your company can be made more secure. And if you love the topic of social engineering, make sure you check out our Slack channel. We have over 1,100 people in there every day talking about things like psychology, pretexting, phishing, all sorts of things. We've had a bunch of people find jobs now in our job board and job forum there. So come on in, check out the link in the show notes or the invite on the Human Hacker Twitter account. I'd like to also invite everyone to take a moment to please go and check out the Innocent Lives Foundation at innocentlivesfoundation.org. The team at the ILF is working now for over 5 years to help fight crimes against children. We've been supporting law enforcement around the globe and creating 450 cases against groups who traffic children and people who harm and abuse children. We can use your support and donations, so please check out how you can be a part of the solution at www.innocentlivesfoundation.org. Speaking of the ILF, we have an amazing board there, and one of our board members is Neil Fallon, who's the lead singer of the best band on earth, Clutch. If you haven't heard of them, go check out pro-rock.com. They're on tour right now, and they're the ones who gave us permission to use the awesome music at the beginning of this podcast. Okay, now let's get back to the show. We're talking today with David Hill. David is currently a licensed real estate broker, and you might be thinking, what the heck does that have to do with social engineering? Well, he's also a success certified business coach from the Cardone University Sales and a Cardone University sales trainer. David's been a top producing real estate agent for over 18 years, focusing on phone sales trainer with over 36 years of sales experience in multiple industries. David's also the host of a podcast that I had the pleasure of being on called Path to Mastery, and an author of 2 books, The Sales Playbook and Getting Your Quality of Life Back. David enjoys traveling, spending time with his 3 daughters, his wife, and enjoys exercise. He runs triathlons and an Ironman race, which I don't even know how you can do that. So, David, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you having me, man. It's an honor to be here. And I'm glad that you mentioned the Slack channel because I'm going to get signed up and get on that Slack channel myself.
Awesome. So let's start off, first of all, with the idea of 36 years in sales. Now, how did you get started in that career path? And then where you said, this is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I'm going to be in sales.
Yeah, it's actually probably closer to 38 now, but I got to update that bio. Yeah, I mean, listen, I remember I was a young kid. I think I was working at like Big D bagging groceries or something. And I saw an ad to make $100,000 a year. And so I called and it was to, they had me come in and it was Kirby. Remember Kirby vacuum cleaners?
I do.
Yeah. And so, I was going to call and set appointments to, for the Kirby vacuum cleaner guys to go over there. And I was going to make $100,000 a year doing that. And that's where I got started. I did it for, I don't know how long it lasted, maybe a few months. It was interesting. But it was good. I got my kind of feet wet with cold calling, and honestly, that's where it all started. So, many moons ago, in a little call center on Main Street in Worcester, Massachusetts.
That is crazy. So, 38 years ago, you start selling vacuum cleaners. You fall in love with the idea of sales. I can only imagine that in the last 38 years, the way that we have to sell things to be successful has probably drastically changed. What have you seen massive changes in that process?
Obviously with technology, it's changed a little bit. I think people, culturally, I think people have changed a lot as well. Obviously, back then everything was about grinding and, the grinder got the deal.
Yes.
I grew up from my mother kind of taught me that. She's been a salesperson for, 60 years now, almost her life, And, it was all about the grind, and the more, dials, the more numbers, the more people you talk, which still is, that's still relevant today. But I think today it's more about relationships, connecting with people. You have social media. We didn't have that back then. So, it's interesting, Chris, when you think about it. I mean, I still can remember, having to, go on an appointment, you'd have to stop at a payphone to call the person and
Yes.
confirm, right? And
Yeah.
you had a map. You didn't have GPS, you had a map, right? Remember that?
Yes.
Like in the car? And,
I do.
and there was no cell phone, so it was a different time. So things have changed tremendous. And I'd say the biggest change has definitely been technology. I mean, technology showing up everywhere.
I remember those days. I actually remember, I was just talking to my kids about this. I was driving home one day from work late at night, listening to the radio, and some free tickets came on for a concert I wanted to see. And I had to pull over and find a payphone so I can call this radio station to win those tickets. And I remember those days. There was no cell phone that you could just text whatever number to or I had to pull over, find a payphone. Hopefully it wasn't being used so I can win those tickets. Wow. And I'm not even, neither of us are that old. Right.
Yeah. Well, it's ironic because I'm a success certified coach now. And just this morning I had posted I was going through my glove box the other day and I found a CD from 2016 and it was Mel Robbins. And I don't know if you follow Success or not. The magazine's been around 125 years, the organization, but in 2016, I used to get the magazine every month and it had a CD insert. So I'd get the CD out and, I'd drive around and I'd listen to the CD in my car and I love doing that. And I was just thinking about this morning, Chris. It's unbelievable how much things have changed in only 6 years. I mean, I was thinking that was 15 years ago, but it's only 2016. We were still using CDs, so I find that fascinating. And so I think technology is really probably the biggest shift now is just the way we can connect with anybody, the way we're connected with people, the way people can find out more information about us, the way we can target people, right? We can follow people around. All the data we have access to. So there's just, it's definitely a different animal now.
So your second book, you have it called Getting Your Quality of Life Back. Now, where does that theme come into play? Thinking with your years of experience as a salesperson, what does that have to do with your quality of life?
Yeah. So in 2009, I had woke up one morning and I just felt like, my team was selling about 100 houses a year and I was frustrated. I was just really frustrated. I was working a lot of hours. My life was consumed by whatever clients wanted. From the moment I opened my eyes at 7 a.m. or whenever it was back then, I slept a little later than I do now. That was it. I was on the phone. I was dealing with email and text and all that stuff. And it was like, I was like a slave to people. And, and I was starting to hate real estate, which was a career that was really, really good to me, opened a lot of doors. And, I just realized like, wow, I don't even love this anymore. I was thinking about doing something else. And then John Alexandrov, who was my first business coach, came into my life. And, God rest his soul. He passed a few years back of cancer, but he helped me to get control of my life and my schedule. And it really started off by just setting some standards for myself, things that I put in place as far as when I would take phone calls, when I would shut it down, when I would, be available to people. And once I set standards, then I had to go set some expectations. And now essentially, the expectations are letting other people know, hey, this is how I do business. If that works for you, great. If it doesn't, then hey, that's fine too. Then, we probably just aren't a good fit. So it really started there. And then I had to look at my schedule and I started time blocking. And so, the book's really geared towards, real estate agents, but anybody that, if you really, because that's really, really, a lot of people find themselves in that same situation where they can't, they're just at the beck and call of their business and they're not enjoying it anymore. So that's why we wrote the book, because in the real estate space, I see a lot of people that their whole life, like from the second they get up in the morning till the second they go to bed at night, they're just on the phones and text and email and they're stressed. They go on vacation, they're on the phone the whole time. It's a tough place to be. It's a tough life to live. So and that can happen in a lot of different industries, but I spend a lot of time in real estate, as you know. So
the first thing you said was that you set standards for yourself. Let's talk about that, because that sounds like an interesting concept, regardless of what business you're in.
Yeah.
That could be a really hard thing to commit to and do, setting some rules for yourself or standards for yourself. So how did you come about that? Was there a process or some secret that you have that enabled you to do that successfully?
I don't know if it's a secret. I think John helped me. You know, funny, I'm struggling to keep my head in this little square camera box here. John Alexandrov was my coach, and, you know, he worked with me on it. And, you know, it was really just, okay, looking at what do I want out of my life? Like, what do I want out of my business? You know, and here's the thing about it, you know, within 2 years, we were doing more business. I had hired some really talented people, and I was working. At that time, I was probably putting in 75 to 80 hours a week in real estate. And I would explain the situation: stress, frustration. Yep. Within 2 years, I was working, 45 to maybe 50 hours a week because I chose to. I had talented people around me, and I was making more money. To be honest with you, I was making more money from my business. But it all started with me having to make a decision, like, what did I want from my business? What did I think was acceptable, not acceptable? And I'll tell you, it was hard because at first I struggled, like, because I didn't want to tell somebody, hey, I'm not available to take your call at 9 a.m. because I thought somehow that would cost me business. Or if somebody called me at 7 or 8 at night, I would take their call out of fear of maybe losing out on a business or maybe not getting a piece of business. And once I just set those standards and I was okay with it, and most people were okay with it, and if they weren't, then, hey, that wasn't my client. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's just not my client.
So let's examine that a little bit, because that sounds really interesting to me, that your standards, your rules that you set for yourself, you had to get okay with them first. So how did you get over that fear that many of us may be experiencing, that, if I don't take this call or if I'm not available for this meeting, I may miss out and they're going to go somewhere else? How did you get over that?
Oh, that's a good question. You really, how did I get over it? That's, you're making me think. That's how it's a really good question.
Good.
Yeah. Right. It's good to do that every once in a while. I'm thinking back, it was more, looking at what did I want my life to be like, right? Like in making that commitment, so looking at what other successful people were doing. I think one of the biggest eye openers for me was John brought us out to an event, and this was my first, this is 2009. I started in real estate in 2002. Even before that, it's over 17 years in multiple industries. Never had a coach. Didn't even if someone said coaching to me, I was like, yeah, coaches are for football, or basketball. Didn't even, right. So when he came into my life, it opened up my mind to other possibilities. And I remember the first event we went to out in Florida, and, I went in this room and I was with all these other people that were successful, either just as successful and a lot of them more successful than me, to be honest. And when they were sharing, about their, we did this exercise to determine how much money we were making per hour. And at the time, I think it was decent money. I tried to figure out everything I was making, based on how many hours I worked and how many weeks I worked and the whole and how much money I made the year before. And it came out to like $175 an hour. And I was like, okay, I guess that's, it's pretty good. It's not terrible, right? But then some of the other people in the room were making $800 an hour, or $500 an hour. And I was just like, okay, how are these guys doing this? Cause they're doing almost the same amount of business as I am, in some cases, a little bit more, but they're making so much more money is because they weren't involved in every hour of it. They had systems, they had leverage, they had other people.
Right.
So they're
making the same money, working less time. Yeah.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah. And so that's really where it started, was like, what do I want? Does that make sense, Chris?
It does. And I'm chuckling because that's a really interesting concept to me, because it feels like, I think maybe you had the same experience, that when you start out, you have to work hard. You have to put 110% in, or you're never going to get ahead. And then it almost trains you, like, okay, I did this thing. I worked really hard. I put all this effort in. So I have to keep doing that if I want to keep that same level of success. But then we never get out of that rut, where like what you just said is that you realize, well, I could, now that I started the engine, now that it's rolling downhill successfully, I could step back. I don't have to work 100 hours a week. I can work 50 and make the same amount of money.
Yeah. Amen.
And that's hard, I think, getting that into a successful person's mindset, because we are, I think you nailed it where you said we're afraid. Afraid. Do you want to take the risk of, well, if I step back and it may take a year, and then I look back at that year and I go, no, I didn't do as good this year because I took that step back. It may be harder to rebuild.
Well, there's also a perfectionism element in there too, right? Like nobody else can do things as good as me. And I'm the best and I can't give things away, and not having trust. So, I mean, there's so many, things that are, involved in this conversation, but yeah, I think we have to just get to that place where, I like to say pain, once the pain of not doing something, exceeds the pain of doing it, then that's when you're going to take some actions. Right. And that's kind of where I was in my life. I was just in so much frustration and pain. And I was just like, I got to do something different. I'm just going to quit. I was making good money. I mean, at the time, it was more money than I ever made in my life, but I just was not happy.
And money doesn't always equal happiness, does it?
No, it doesn't. But it's definitely a necessity, and it certainly helps with things in life. Yeah. But you're right. It doesn't equal happiness.
So, in conversations with you, you said you have a superpower. What is that superpower? Yeah,
my superpower is just a resilience, man. I feel like I am the type of person that just keeps moving and keeps moving. And it's, I'd say it's in some cases, it probably was to a detriment, because, there were some times I focused on things maybe longer than I should have. But as I've gotten older and gotten smarter, I realized there's times where I need to let things go. But yeah, I mean, it comes from my childhood. I come from a really, really bad childhood, abusive father, and eventually was, taken away from my parents in state custody of New York. But my father taught me, discipline. He taught me to just be resilient, and some of the things, like when you're beaten, if you cry when you're being beaten, you get beaten harder. I mean, those are the kind of things. And it's interesting that I'm having this conversation now, because as a young adult, I didn't see, I didn't see anything in that. I just, but as I've gotten older, although it's messed up, and I experienced a lot of things that I don't want people to go through, it did create in a lot of ways, a lot of strength in me, and resilience, and where I've been able to get through a lot and keep moving forward in areas where a lot of other people would quit. And I think that's why, through ups and downs in the real estate market right now, the real estate market is shifting again. We're starting to go down. The last 2 times the market shifted, we pivoted, we shifted, and each time our business came out more successful, more profitable, in a bigger business, just because, we're going to continue moving on, continue doing what we're doing. And if that's not working, we're going to find something else right away and just keep moving forward. So I think resilience has always been something that, I'm good at. Same thing, you do an Ironman race, you need resilience. And, I think so. Yeah, it's, I feel like I was born. My father created this resilience machine. So I try to find anything good in my childhood, and I would say that was it.
So sorry about that experience. That's pretty terrible sounding.
Well, hey, you know what? I just want to say I've got 3 amazing daughters, and they have a phenomenal life. And, I realize I went through that, so that, they don't ever have to go through anything like that. I understand perspective. I've helped a lot of kids. I used to go locally, talk to all the kids in the schools and the communities around me, and, underprivileged communities. So it's created an opportunity for me as well to kind of give back and help some other people. So I appreciate you saying that.
No, that's awesome, by the way, to be able to use it that way. So for people who are listening to this podcast, and maybe they haven't had that experience, right? They haven't gone through what you've gone through in your childhood. How can they get resilience? How can they get this grit? Are there some tips or tricks you can give that can help people to to build that superpower that you have without having to go through all the horrible things you went through?
Yeah. That's the magic question, right? That's
it is
the $1 million question you just asked right there. Everybody's heard this before. But it's true. It's the reason everybody's heard it is because it's like, figure out what you're really passionate about, right? It's like, what are you really, really passionate about? What moves you? What is the thing that's going to really make you get out of bed in the morning, at 5 a.m. or whenever you get up, 4 a.m. and want to jump out of bed and say, I'm up. Yes, I can't wait to get to work on this. I mean, that's the thing that's going to help people when times get tough. If you're doing what you love doing and what you're passionate about, we're going to keep moving forward. I don't have any fancy answer besides that. I mean, I think that, if you're in your passion and you're clear, we have to be clear too. We have to be clear on our goals and clear on our expectations. Grant Cardone, who I'm a licensee for, I work with a lot of salespeople. I train salespeople. I do more training of salespeople and real estate agents right now than I do selling real estate. But one of the things in his book, the 10X rule, is 10. You have to set the right expectations that things are going to be 10 times harder than you expect them to be. And I believe that's a mistake that a lot of people make, is they don't really set the right expectations for themselves when they go into something. And because of it, things are just way more challenging or way more difficult. And unfortunately, a lot of people quit. So I think, that's a way to first make sure you're doing what you're passionate about. Because, and here's the thing, this too. I mean, are we always in the thing that we're passionate about? Unfortunately, probably not. But you have to figure it out on your own. You have to realize that, how much time do I get to spend doing, like for me, like going on appointments or working with somebody, like coaching calls. That's the fun part. In between that is, the work, practicing, doing, role play, doing, practice coaching calls, going on, seminars, workshops. That's the work for me, doing that. So then when I meet with somebody, I can really help that person. I can really move that person. So I think, I hope that answer helps, but I know it's kind of your textbook answer, but it really does make a difference when we're passionate about something and we have purpose on it. We're going to go a lot harder, and if we, again, you have to have a path. We have to be able to lay out a path, which is SMART goals is a great way to lay out a path for yourself, create some really SMART goals moving forward. And that's an acronym from, I forget whose book that is, but, SMART goals. I forget where it comes from, but it's from a really good book. Maybe Stephen Covey, to be honest with you.
So let's delve into that a little bit, because I think you made a couple really valid points, right? That sometimes in life, we're not in an area that we're passionate about. I've had multiple jobs when I was a younger man that I did them because I had to pay the bills. Mm-hmm. I did them. I was out of work and my family needed to eat. So I went and did jobs that I definitely knew were not going to be my lifetime career, right? I slung mud for a mason before. I've cleaned floors. I've cleaned windows, mowed yards. All those things, I knew they weren't my passion, but I had to do them. So if I understand what you're saying correctly, you're not just saying, hey, look, if you're not in your passion job right now, quit and go find it. But what kind of steps could a person who maybe is not in a job that they're passionate about, what kind of things can they do so they could start making those goals, those SMART goals, to get to a place where they're passionate?
Yeah, and definitely I'm not telling everybody to go quit their jobs right now. But I think just knowing, I think sometimes, like something I do myself, I have a very regimented routine. I get up at 4:45. My first 30 minutes are spent with this group. And then, we have a meeting. We get together every morning, 5 a.m. to 5:30. Then I go into journaling, and I use the Brendan Bouchard daily planner. I do meditate every morning. I write my goals. I visualize things, and then I work out. And I think having that type of a structure helps me focus, and I'll be honest, the writing, it's a big deal for me because I really can look at myself where I am if I'm honest with myself, and it's hard to not be honest with yourself when you're writing, right? I mean, who are you lying to, right? It's like, right. So I think that's always been a great process, and for me, and honestly, I would tell you that probably just in the last 3 or 4 years is I've kind of started to figure things out for myself. But I think if we first figure out what it is you love doing, what are you passionate about, and I mean, we all know, right? Like, what is it you're passionate about? Like, I used to be passion, like I want to be a race car driver. That was like my dream growing up. Well, that I don't think I'm ever going to be an F1 driver. So I have to accept reality. Who knows? I mean, I'll have part of an F1 team someday. That's an option, right? But but I just have to realize like what makes me excited, what makes me happy, where am I feeling good, where am I feeling alive? So for me, when people have breakthroughs, I feel awesome. That's how I got involved in this. I used to go teach for Keller Williams back in my Keller Williams days. That's where I started in real estate, and they'd have me teach a class. And at first I was terrible, but I just kept showing up and doing it. And then at the end of classes, people would come up and say, "Oh, that was really good." And then, a couple of weeks later, somebody would email me and say, "Hey, I just took my first listing because I took your class." I'm like, "Oh, that's amazing." And then I'd see people at events and I'm like, "Oh man, I did what you said and it worked." And so that started just inspiring me. I wanted more of that. I wanted more people saying, "Yeah, because of this happened." And so I realized that, wow, that was something that I am passionate about, but I still wasn't willing, Chris. I wasn't willing to leave real estate, so I was half a trainer or not even half. I was a 30% training and 70% real estate, and I'll be honest, it affected my real estate career. And I was making, you can make a lot more money selling real estate. I shouldn't say that. Where I was back then, I made more money selling real estate than teaching or training or coaching. But that's the challenge. We're trying to do both, So I finally, COVID for me was a breakthrough. I was able to just say, you know what, this is a perfect opportunity for me now to shift gears. And that's what I did. And since COVID started, I've transitioned, and now, we sell a couple houses a month. My wife and I both have real estate licenses, but 85% of my time is with clients, training, coaching, doing what I absolutely love. So hope that helps.
Just as a personal question, if you're getting up at 4:45, what time do you go to bed?
Yeah, my kids aren't helping these days, Chris. Normally I go to bed at like 9:30, 9:45. Well, 7 hours is all I need. 7 hours, I'm in good shape. But the kids are just, they're home from school, and so I'm probably going to bed closer to like 10:30, 11 now. But I just get up. I mean, hey, listen, a friend of mine, when here's the thing with getting up early. Once you're up, you're up. It's just a matter of getting out of bed, right? I mean, anybody knows that. You drag yourself out of bed and have some water, have some cold. I always have cold water on my nightstand. And when you drink that cold water, it just energizes you. So I think it's just getting up. But yeah, that's what time I go to bed.
Okay. So I had to ask because I can't imagine that time of day. I'm definitely not a morning person, but
no, that's all right.
But what I get out of what you're saying is this routine you have. So regardless if it's 4:45 or it's 9:45, whatever it is, you have a routine that you follow every day that seems to help you move your life towards these goals of success. And you do that every day. So that way, basically you have when you wake up, you know exactly what you're going to do. You know exactly what the plan is. For tomorrow, when you wake up, you're going to do these 3 things before you start your job for the day. And it sounds like that is the secret equation, right? Because, I mean, even though maybe that doesn't lead you towards what you're passionate about, but having that routine gives you time to plan, to think, to write, to meditate, to work out, to do things that are going to make your life better for yourself, which then means you'll be better prepared to make those decisions as you move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I also, years ago, Gary Keller He calls it strategic thought time. So I'm going to give him credit for it. So every Sunday from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern, I have strategic thought time where I just sit down and I just think about, how did my week go? How did I do with the goals I had set? Where am I mentally, spiritually, physically, my family, my wife, everything. Even just, telling my wife, giving my wife compliments twice a day is a goal of mine, right? Because I naturally don't always want to do that, right? And I made a commitment we went to a party a couple of weeks ago, and I talked to my coach, and I told my coach I was going to shut my phone off for the whole day and go to this party and just spend the day with my kids and my wife, and I did. And it was amazing. And I actually forgot I had a phone. So I think sometimes it's not just all about work, grind. We got to do those other things too. And I realized recently, I don't have, not that I don't have a lot of friends. I just don't, since COVID, I've, built this studio type place over my garage, and I've spent so much time here, cause now a lot of my stuff's done virtually. So, I've kind of lost contact with a lot of people I used to hang out with. So one of the goals I have this week is I need to spend time with a couple of my older buddies that I haven't met in a while. So, I set up to go see my buddy Mike. We're probably gonna have a cigar, Wednesday night, and just do some things like that. So I just try to have the most balanced life I can, and I think that helps.
That's pretty awesome. Thank you. I got a couple final questions that we always ask people, but first, most of us, when we have people on the podcast and we hear stories like this, you're obviously a very success story coming from your childhood to where you are now, and most of us have not gotten there without a little bit of help. So who would you say your greatest mentors are in your life?
Well, I'd say definitely John Alexandrov, who I mentioned earlier, was huge for me. I am just a fan of Jim Rohn. I'm sure you know who Jim Rohn is, motivational speaker. Even though I've never met Jim Rohn, I know Jairek Robbins, who's Tony Robbins' son. He's a friend of mine, so I get to spend some time with him. And Jim was his godfather. So just actually, I don't want to say I'm not 100% sure that's true that Jim was his godfather. Jim was somehow connected to him in a way, because I said that before and someone said that's not true. So I think it's true, but you can't quote me on that. But the reason I'm sharing that though is because Jairek spent a lot of time with Jim when he was younger, and I've spent time with Jairek, and he shared some things with me, and he shared a CD and some other things that came from Jim, which has been pretty wild. And so I just listened to his philosophy, which is really simple. Like someone like me, like I said earlier, I'm resilient. I'm kind of a grinder in a lot of ways. So when you think about Jim Rohn's simple philosophies of, don't wish it was easier, wish you were better, for things to change, you have to change, right? I mean, one of my favorites is, if you don't like where you are, move. You're not a tree. I mean, it's almost simple, right? It's super simple, but so I think Jim Rohn, Jairek is, a friend of mine, and he's just a really, really good guy, inspirational. So I get a lot from books. I mean, I have your book right here. I loved your book, and that's why,
Thank you.
I reached out to you after reading it, and I said, wow, this is really, really good. I want to get you on my podcast, which led to this. And, I think in sales, this is something that all salespeople. So I feel like books are mentors too, to me, right?
Yeah.
Picking up like this book here, well, I'm not going to promote other people's books on your podcast, but yeah, this is.
No, that's okay. Please. I was about to ask you that question.
Well, this book right here, Shift by Gary Keller, who was also one of my mentors, was tremendous for me in the last two shifting markets. Gary, I got the opportunity to spend, 4 years in Gary's mastermind, and 4 times a year, I met with the other 100, top producers at Keller Williams Realty at the time. And got to learn from somebody that built the largest independent real estate company in the world, 170,000 agents. And so, so he was definitely a mentor to me as well. And, taught me a lot of, good things about, just hiring and being committed and things like that.
That's wonderful. Actually, my last question was exactly what you were doing. So it's about books, because we have, over the years of doing this podcast, our listeners are avid readers. So we started collecting book recommendations. And every guest we ask, can you give us one or two book recommendations? And of course, your books will be in the show notes.
Thank you.
But I just added Shift from Gary Keller. Are there any other books that you think are just pivotal and people should definitely read them?
Yeah, I read a book recently, which is Stephen Kotler. Do you know who Stephen Kotler is? It's called The Art of Impossible. Really solid. And I'll tell you, the biggest thing I took from that book is curiosity. He just talks a lot about curiosity, and it's not something I'd ever heard before. So it just got me thinking a lot about curiosity. Like when I'm, meeting with people, or I'm listening to people, or just like thinking like, okay, why am I feeling like that way? Like, why don't I like what this person's saying? So, like that is different than my normal thought is just like, I don't like this person, just move on. So I think curiosity in a lot of ways, or, meeting with clients, which I've always kind of inherently done it without thinking about it, but just trying to understand like where someone else is coming from, So curiosity, there's a lot in that book, but curiosity was probably one of the biggest things I took from it. Just because when you want to achieve something that's impossible, you need to have a lot of curiosity.
Yeah. I love that message. That's great. Stephen Kotler, The Art of Impossible. I wrote that down. Wonderful. Wonderful. David, if people wanted to know more about you, your work, things like that, where's the best place for them to go to get information on you?
Yeah, thank you. I have it's just davidhill.link. That is, that links up everything. If you go to davidhill.link, have my websites there, my podcast, my book links, everything, all the events we do. That's definitely the best place to get me. Also my books, the sales playbook, 11 simple strategies to close more sales. That's on Amazon. Or if you want to get an ebook, it's a real ebook. It opens in an ebook reader. Right now we're only charging $4.97 for it. So you can go to simplesalesbook.com if you want to get a copy of that. And yeah, davidhill.link though is definitely the easiest way to get in touch with me.
That's amazing. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today, sharing some of your story with us, especially I know how hard it can be to talk about some of those things, but then the successes that you had in your life. Thank you for sharing your steps to getting there. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. Really, I appreciate that. I told my wife 6 months ago, I said, I got to get on more podcasts. I'm always having people on my podcast, but I'm not on many podcasts. So I just appreciate you doing this for me. Thank you. It's an honor.
Not a problem. And thank you everyone for joining us today and listening to the show. Next month, we'll be joined by someone who you've probably heard on this podcast before, personal friend, but also coach and trainer, Stephanie Paul. So we'll see you all next month. Thanks, David. And thanks everybody. See ya.